Sharks, piranhas, electric eels, mutants, attack subs, aliens, and Pong. Everything one would expect to find under the sea has a place here in Bob the Fish. Hello and welcome to YesterYear's Mac Games, where the subject of interest today is an action arcade title set underwater. The player is put in control of Bob, who is a fish. Bob can swim freely around the X and Y axis, there's no jumping here, and I think this is what makes it stand out. It really does handle like nothing else. Getting Bob running was a bit of a faff. The copy already archived wouldn't work for me, irrespective of what Mac I attempted to run it on. Eventually, I decided to try and find the version I first played on a Mac format. I had no idea which one it was on, but they do all come with a digital catalogue. A later disc will have a note on everything contained on the earlier ones. Mac format 71. That saved me manually looking through all of them. The game requires a Power Mac, but one running System 7 or 8. macOS 9 crashes before it can get to the level select screen, which is a bit of a shame, but even with an older OS, faster systems will run the game too fast, causing the foes to pelt around the screen at impossible speeds. Unregistered, this Shareware game will offer players 10 stages, but the other 40 can be accessed with a Code Finder application that the game's developer, John Butler, added in some years later. I've played Bob the Fish unregistered a few times through the years, so the lion's share of the game's content is new to me, and for the most part, it's been good fun. Arrow keys move Bob around, and space blows bubbles. These bubbles are in effect Bob's weapon. We could critique the physics behind projectiles of air being produced from essentially nothing, but realism isn't treated as important. Cats have suits to exist underwater, but Bob's dog doesn't need one, nor do Bo Peep's sheep. A story is sort of present, but treated with similar levels of indifference. Hamikushio, the friendly fish, was mutated by toxic waste, didn't get a Christmas card, and got a bit grumpy. He therefore decided to make a nuisance of himself by taking control of most of the fishy population and nicking a bunch of pearls. Bob and a handful of others were spared the mind control because they paid their Shareware registration fees. So, it's Bob's job to clobber this mob with flob that he lobs from his gob. That'll teach them for not supporting Shareware. I feel just like Captain Hector. After a certain amount of abuse, foes will turn belly up and slowly float to the top of the screen, and just sort of stay there, dead. It does in time start to look like a massacre. It is to the game's immense credit that the vast majority of stages are able to do something different. Some ideas are shared between a few of them, but they all feel like they have their own unique purpose, in comparison to other action titles which can feel like it's the same thing rearranged a bunch of times. Some are great. I really liked the Alien stage and the Tribe's Trial, while things like Pong and the Galaxian stages acted as an effective pace change. There were some stinkers too. This single screen stage had some of the crabs moving quickly in such small spaces that it got really difficult to dispatch them without dying. This one, where Bob has to push anchors to the correct sides in the correct order, is tedious trial and error and not fun at all, and I haven't the faintest idea what to do here. In some ways then, it's quite good that the player can pick whatever stage to play in whatever order they choose to play it. I never finished the anchor stage, because nuts to trying every single option until stumbling randomly onto the correct one, but at least I don't have to do it in order to progress. This observation works both ways though, having some sort of way to tell which stages are easier and harder with an ordered level of progression, or even just a visual cue provided by the background would have introduced a difficulty curve that could have prevented new players inadvertently trying all the hard stages first. One of the first levels I stumbled blindly into was a boss, which felt odd so early on. Visuals, for the most part, are very good. The sprites look clean and well designed, and the levels are fairly colourful and inviting. Unless of course they're deliberately trying not to be. I do love the variety of fish that Bob squares up against, from the brutish to the benign. They're all clearly deserving of their bubbly fate. I mean, look at this guy. Pure evil. The soundtrack was provided by Fade Out Studio, aka Jens Nielsen, who was quite a prominent composer for Macintosh Shareware titles, and now does complicated things with blockchain. There's a link to his website in the video description. The game's tunes are playing in the background and are, for the most part, quite good, although the title track is a bit intense. One moan that I do have is regarding the AI. Now, I realise that John Butler was a youngster when he made the game, and good AI, I'm guessing, is one of the more complicated or boring things to do. But with the exception of the sharks and piranhas, which chase Bob down, I think what we have here is a couple of random number generators which periodically decide which direction and speed the foes are going to go in. This is a problem, particularly with the faster fish, as it all too often results in progression being down to blind luck rather than any skill on behalf of the player. It also encourages camping, as Bob sits in an alcove waiting for the critters to come to an advantageous location. One scenario that saw me sat around doing nothing for absolutely ages involved this vertical tunnel populated with a few of these little scheming spheres. With Bob only capable of shooting horizontally, it was impossible to travel upwards safely in order to dispatch them. Had to wait for them to come down. Another situation saw me being so careful in another maze section, due to fear of a sudden direction change sending me back to the start, it's a one-hit KO, that the jellyfish above multiplied to such an extent that it literally crashed the game. There was about 5 stages that I didn't complete, and I think my advice for a positive overall experience with the game would be to just leave the ones that are causing frustration. I flailed around with a couple of these for ages, and it just wound me up. This sort of thing can consume a memory of the game, to the point that one forgets how much fun the rest of it is. There is something to be said for just enjoying the better stages, like eating around a bruised bit of a banana. These limitations aside, however, I consider Bob the Fish to be an excellent bit of classic macOS shareware. It's fun to play, there's a fair amount of it, and the whole experience stays in one's mind. You know, I can only assume that it's down to being a nuisance to get running, that there isn't more about this game out there. I typed Bob the Fish into YouTube to see if I could find anyone else's take on the title, and instead found what turned out to be a fantastic series of videos by someone with that name about the visual identities of the old regional television stations that made up the UK's ITV network. For those looking to give it a shot themselves, downloads can be found on the Abandonware sites, which I've linked in the description. That'll do then for this edition of YYZMG. Thoughts, comments, memories, favourite stages, favourite fish, favourite Bob can all be communicated to me here in the comments, or on the Twitter. Do subscribe if you fancy keeping on top of new content, and mooch around my channel for more videos like this that I've already made. Otherwise, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.